In the Rulers Demo 7-3 here, and today we have a feature match between myself on Beatrice Astema playing against Josh and his take on Asuka in the current ban list format. Let's go ahead and jump right in.
This session brought to you by Odyssey Games for pre-orders and sealed product, TCG Prime for tons of singles and supplies, Cardo Doko for international rulers looking for products, and FoulLibrary.com for articles and wonderful deck lists,
as well as our guest lecturer members King Pearlshine, Vite Ramen, Mognite, and Darren Noblock.
Class is in session.
Okay, rulers, so as they get in here, just a reminder that Odyssey Games does have pre-orders up right now for Crimson Moon Battleground. You can check the link in the description to go pick up your boxes of that set before it drops later in May. It's looking like it's going to be a really cool set coming from all the spoilers, so you're definitely not going to want to miss it. So as we go in here, the Asuka deck is a pretty standard Asuka in the sense that it is using the same kind of things we've seen before in terms of the contract loop, in terms of, Phantasmal Ascendant to ramp stones, in terms of, looping Lucifers and other ways to kind of burn your opponent out so that you don't really have to attack with Asuka. You're just kind of like burning them out really quickly. The only big difference is that it is also playing Repairing the Deathscythe, mainly because this is a great way in your opponent's turn to get permanent stones off of it. So not only do you have Phantasmal Ascendant, but you also have Repairing the Deathscythe. You have this kind of other contract that you can go into during your opponent's turn, as opposed to only using Death at Midnight, using Night of the Legendary Vampire to go into it. And on the right, we have Beatrice Astema, which is doing the same kind of things it always does in terms of getting down to 0 cards, forcing your opponent to be at 0 cards, and then keeping them there. The only difference now is that we have the end of the legendary warrior, the Undefeated Legend, which is a really cool way to kind of set up the combo a little bit better in a way that still keeps you with way more cards than your opponent at the end. So getting both of you down to 0 cards, and then also at the end of the turn being back up to 4 cards. So you just control the game state from there. Seeing that Paramita off the top here, or from the beginning, and a pass from Astema Beatrice going first, starting with just 4 cards in your hand. We're going to see a Callstone of a Wanderer Moon. Looks like there is a Revenant on top of the deck. Revenant's a pretty cool card for this list, particularly because you can reanimate it, and because you're milling a lot, it's usually going to enter pretty large, and then at that point in time, it's probably entering while you have contract, so you can then just immediately have this spot removal to keep the board controlled. So a pretty cool include from Josh. We're going to use Nullstone to pay 200 life here at the end of his turn, and before he gets even a chance to use that Paramita, we're going to use the Kilowell to pop it, just to get it off the board. And because he's probably playing the red version, make it so he has to find a Dark Alice to be able to protect his graveyard, which could be important. That being said, we are playing Persephones in the Astema Beatrice list, just for some more way to have some interaction, as well as graveyard hate, so that also helps us a little bit too. Callstone pass from Astema. We're not quite ready to pull the trigger on anything yet, so we're just going to let him hit that Phantasmal Ascendant, filtering into red using Light Moonchild to be able to cast it. Down comes the stone, and we go into a Lucifer. So a pretty big kind of early swing here. This is going to be a 500 point life swing here at the end of my turn, going into his turn, and then he can swing in for another 8 to take me down to 25. That being said, the Astema Beatrice list with End of the Undefeated Legend doesn't super care about its life total. Like, it's got to be paying its life pretty well, because End of the Undefeated says set both players' life to 2,000. So if I'm less than 2,000, I will gain it, which is not super that big of a deal. And I also don't really care about the fact that he's gaining life off of the Lucifer either, because it's not going to do anything, because we're just going to set his life down to 2,000. Calling stone here. Does see a stone of the Chaos Moon, gets to 4C. And then what is common to try to make use of these temporary stones from Phantasmal Ascendant to turn them into permanent stones with things like Magic Stone Research Institute. So that's going to come down and try to make everything a little bigger. Now that's a little bit too much damage for me. Like, it's more than I want to be trying to deal with right now. Now he would, in sacrificing the stone, be generating some will for me. So there is a world where we could, in response to him losing the stone, we force him to you know, we can go and get Inferno and have 1 will to pay for it and kind of clear the board out here. Instead, we're just going to spend a little bit of life and do Sealed One-Eyed Dragon before the Institute comes into play to try to shoot the Phantasmal Ascendant and then draw into an extra card. Because of Astema's trigger, paying 200 here to cast a Voice from the Void to try to draw into something, hoping to hit a Persephone. Like a Persephone here would be really good, although we did have to unfortunately use the Moonshade, so probably not going to draw us into anything else right now because we only have access to a Darkness and Fire Will. But still, you know, we paid 800 there as opposed to taking the potentially 2,000 that's coming our way. The Lucifer's probably going to get to swing in, which is fine, but we don't want to have to worry about both the Phantasmal and the Lucifer being that large. Institute's going to enter, sacking this temporary stone, getting a new permanent stone. We see it's just the same one, another Darkness Moon Fragment 4C. Let's decide to ship that card to the bottom. Does look like we might have a Knight of the Legendary Vampire in hand, as well as potentially another Revenant. It does have Contract in hand as well. With the number of cards he has in graveyard at this point in time, Contract would not be successful, but you do see he has double Lore of Tsukiyomi in hand, which is something that will let him be able to contract this turn if he wants. So swings in with the Lucifer, hits me for 10. Using Lore of Tsukiyomi to try to buy back the Paramita, just as a way to kind of fuel stuff, and we do actually have a Persephone in hand here to try to remove it from their graveyard in response, so he doesn't get to buy anything back. So he'll still have to mill 2. And he could still go into contract here, especially since there's a Phantasmal Ascendant in grave. He could tap out for that reason. He's pretty safe to do so, because we didn't have an Angelic Battle Barrier or anything else like that. Ultimately, though, he does just choose to pass. So we're going to go into our turn, call Stone. Hit another Moonshade. Paying 1 red, going down to 1,300 life. To cast a Killua Fossil Girl in the city, trying to target his Institute. Just pop that and get it out of the way. We are going to see a remove from graveyard using Institute in response. Keeping in mind, though, that there's a little bit of an error here, that the Killua spell I just moved to the RFG wouldn't have left the chase yet, so it would still technically be going to graveyard. That's going to then trigger Astema, and I get to produce some will. We're going to go ahead and do a Judgment of Astema to try to pop the Lucifer, which is then going to get to produce us 2 more will. Instead of drawing cards, we're going to cast End of the Undefeated Legend. So using the will from Astema to cast Undefeated Legend, after having discarded 1, it is going to blow up my own Astema, which we accept as a consequence, but it is going to make me set both of our life totals to 2,000, so I'm going to gain some life back, which is helpful. I unfortunately don't have the will to be able to do Inferno right now. Simply, like, if I had 1 more stone, there was a possibility of it, but it's also kind of helped refill the hand, which felt a little bit suboptimal. Sets my life back up to 2,000, takes him down to 2,000, and at the end of the turn, because of Beatrice, I actually get to draw 4 cards. So, because End of the Undefeated Legend will trigger, but also does trigger Beatrice, who has the null, so I will draw 4. So getting to draw those extra cards. kind of explaining exactly how that sequencing is going to work, because I'm out of cards here. And I think Undefeated Legend is a wonderful card for Beatrice decks. I mean, just as a way to help recycle really quickly, because you can still get to 0 cards and in like an instant, get some value out of going to 0 cards, and then get into have a hand back is very nice. Unfortunately, though, without an Inferno to kind of follow it up, it falls a little short here in terms of paying against Josh. So he's just going to go ahead and kind of start slamming bodies down here to push pressure and going into my turn. Drawing the 1 card from Beatrice, drawing the 3 cards from End of the Undefeated Legend. But now he gets to swing in for, you know, a minimum of 800 when I'm already at 12, let alone if he plays that contract. You saw he's got a Daji, there's a Lucifer right there. Like, unfortunately, without being able to rip his hand apart, we're in a pretty sorry shape in terms of being able to come back this game, let alone turn off Astema. So it's probably going to end up being a game 1 going to Asuka. We'll just see exactly how Josh finds the lethal. So here comes the Lucifer before recovery. It's going to be a 1500 point game. And then we can move to the recovery at that point in time. Calling Stone potentially. At this point in time, Laura Tsukiyomi and his contract are the only thing he has left in hand here. Swinging for 4. Let's see, we'll pay 2. Flash in our own Phantasmal Ascendant. This is going to get us a stone. And then we can block his Phantasmal with our, or his thing with my Phantasmal, generate some will with Astema. And now we can do God Art of Astema to try to set up a Inferno. The problem is I have cards in my hand. If I didn't have cards in my hand at this point in time, honestly, this move would be great. And would probably super keep me in the game. He could always Light Child in response here, but it's pretty to just like protect himself, since I cast the Phantasmal in response to the God Art, which is like the safe way to just like make sure he's not defeated here, or make sure he doesn't get, you know, crackbacked here. But ultimately, you know, me tapping out for this Inferno, knowing full well that he has contract in hand and he's going to be able to keep cards. He's got this in the bag. He's just going to go ahead and let this resolve. He says, that's fine. You have to discard a card due to the Lucifer. I can play the contract and reanimate 2 of these Lucifers. I can then, you know, I can use Lord of Tsukiyomi to buy back another contract or buy back another Lucifer. Like, there's a lot of things he'll be able to do here that could be lethal. Like, White Child comes down here in response. Like, a line that's guaranteed safe regardless of what he mills here would be use Lord of Tsukiyomi to buy back a Lucifer, cast the Lucifer, drain me for 5, use his contract to kill the Lucifer, and then contract and reanimate the 2 other Lucifers and drain me for a total of 1500 damage. Like, with what he has available to him, he wins the game here. It's just a matter of him pulling out the sequencing. So just kind of casts. I have to discard 2 Lucifer's effects, go down to 2 cards in hand as well. But ultimately, we're just going to see a contract come down, and I'm going to scoop it up. Double checking exactly what he has in grave here. Seeing that he absolutely has the line in terms of the stuff to be able to reanimate. Just asking him to flip over the end of night and see what he mills off of there. There's a Daji. There's another Lucifer. Like, even then, it's like the likelihood that I was going to get drained out is pretty significant. So we'll see end of night come down here, get to reanimate all those cards, because I'm not playing anyway to be able to stop them. And I'm even going to do the work for him of, look at all these things you can reanimate that burn me out. It's 2500 damage worth of burn. Let's go ahead and go into game 2. So moving into game 2 here, Astema choosing to take the coin here, mainly because I don't really care about him having the untap. Like, I'll be able to pop the Paramita if I need to. and also generate some additional will because I popped the Paramita. It's mostly like having more cards early in this matchup can help me set up the combo faster. And Asuka is a deck that does do a lot of its like a board state progression during the main phase. So having you know, his 2-drops start to be able to come down on turn 2 as opposed to turn 1 with coin is also very helpful for the Astema Beatrice list to be able to get itself up and running. You see a Rogue Spectator and that Paramita coming into play. It's another Wanderer's Moon off the top. First stone both games. Just choose to keep that on top, interestingly enough. That's one of the neat things about Astema is the fact that like I'll be calling stone here. I could use the stone to pop, use even coin to use the Kilo spell to pop Paramita, produce some extra will, and then also play another card off of it, which is nice. Ultimately though, we're just going to slam what is notably the best card for me to get off the top and kind of first things first in this deck, which is Wall of Terror. Being able to set up to be 0 cards at the bottom, you know, or immediately when I'm ready to go into the God's Art is very, very helpful for kind of pulling off the piece. Wall of Terror and End of the Undefeated Legend are kind of like the 2 lines that the deck has to be able to set up the hand loss combo very quickly. See a Lucifer at the end of his turn, and then a Pat, and then going into my turn. Can comfortably swing in, doing a little proactive mulliganing with Paramita. Does see Contract and Lore of Tsukuyomi, so well, kind of unfortunate. You'd want to see the Lore in hand and the Contract engraved, so you could buy the Contract back. Starts to go to produce the will for a Guardian Dragon and says, you know what, before I do that, let's go ahead and do the safe play and go to combat. Swing in for 4, and I say, that's fine. I'll go down to 29. I do not mind. Was planning on setting my life to 2,000 anyway. And then we see a Guardian Dragon. So the reason why this is good for the Beatrice deck is this now puts him in an untapped board state, or in a tapped out board state with 2 things on board that Astema can kill. So I can really start to kind of like really control the board state at that point in time and kind of stay ahead of him, which would be helpful, especially since I have Wall of Terror to be able to make it so his main removal source, being Contract, can't hit Astema. Astema will be able to really help keep my hand advantage up here and also keep the board really controlled, especially since she has First Strike and Bane. So calling stone with Beatrice so that we can set up for Astema to be able to flip. 4C1. Thinking about how I want to sequence this here to try to save some will potentially. Realizing, oh wait a minute, I've got a sealed one-eyed in my grave in my hand. I can make the use of this to save my stones for something a little bit more relevant. Going to go ahead and use Sealed One-Eyed Dragon, paying 6 to shoot the Lucifer, recognizing that we are going to have to discard a card. This is going to produce us a will with Astema, and then we can use Astema plus stone or Astema plus coin to go ahead and flip while still leaving 2 will resources up for his turn, which is really helpful. Discarding to the Lucifer, which we're fine with. We start to go to discard a sealed one-eyed dragon, and then that's going to shift because of what we're planning on casting here as a follow-up. We discard the end of the Undefeated Legend. See, look, we have Wall of Terror up right now. Let's do this a little bit differently and not try to go for this line, especially since we're flipping over Astema. Seems clear that we're going to be kind of the aggressor as opposed to the combo play this turn. Just keep the combo in our back pocket. And so we're just going to flip over Astema, kill the Guardian Dragon. That is going to draw us some extra cards, which gives us even more resources with to be able to protect, and also lets us be able to set up this Revenant really, really nicely. We should be down to 2100 life here because of paying the 2 for the Moonshade for Revenant, and then Revenant's right now just a 4/4, but it will get very big very quickly and drain us life, which is also really, really helpful in this matchup. If we're not going for end of the Undefeated Legend, let's just out life gain you, especially since we know that Josh is playing a version of the Asuka contract to try to just drain me out with things like Lucifer and Daji. Having Wall of Terror plus Revenant out is just really, really good. Revenant naturally has access to Barrier Chance, but then things like Child of the Darkness Moon can be stopped by throwing on Barrier with Wall of Terror. The main board clear spot removal for Asuka is Contract, and so being able to give stuff Barrier to prevent that will be very, very relevant. Move to Recovery. That's right, Callstone Pass from Josh. Seeing that Nullstone. Attempting to move into combat, we're going to go ahead and try to swing in with Astema at him. In which case we see a shot for Child of the Darkness Moon to try to kill the Astema. Just trying to figure out exactly what card we want to banish here. Or discard here to Wall of Terror. We're going to discard a Dexia's Advice to give Astema Barrier and then be able to swing in for the 12. Dexia's Advice in this list, swinging in for 6. Taking down to 27. Dexia's Advice in this list is really helpful as a follow-up to the combo, particularly because we probably both have a bunch of cards in our graveyard, and Dexia's Advice then gets us Revenant plus Wall of Terror after we've just refilled our hands, at which point in time we have way more cards in our hands to be able to keep Revenant and Wall of Terror safe, and we're just swinging in with this massive this massive flying Revenant, draining a whole bunch of life while our opponent's at 2,000. We do see that Phantasmal Ascendant come down at the end of the turn, and we say that is fine. You can have that extra resource. Please note that he did call Stone with this Asuka, so he's very clearly trying to potentially go into a Repairing the Deathscythe into Deathscythe Chrono Gear. Rebooted. Hitting a 4C stone off the top, looking like it was an Elixir's Love. We are going to try to go into a Deathscythe rebooted here. We're repairing the Deathscythe. We're saying, you know what? We might let that resolve. There's a world where we let that resolve, but it really is honestly better for us to just minimize his value. And the reason why is because he can use Knight of the Legendary Vampire to kill his own Deathscythe rebooted and then go right into the end of night, right? So it's better for us to say just like no value generation for you at all. Let's go ahead and Persephone that, put it back in your hand, and make you commit to it again next turn. Plays a Dark Alice here. Does tap out to do this though, which feels a little bit weird since he's playing against, like, he doesn't have a flyer in the air, and there's a very real chance that this Astema plus Revenant can get big enough to kill him next turn. Because also Revenant can banish the stones, and so that'll serve as spot removal, which then triggers Astema to draw us more cards, and it also serves to add to Revenant's total unique cards count. Because remember, Revenant, even if he isn't ordered, or even if you don't control the ruler under contract, can just banish the stone to give -6/-6, which is still insanely relevant. So you do see there is a Divine Lightning in hand as well, which is what we need to be able to cycle things out though. However, what we're doing in response, because he is tapped out on his turn, is we are going to go ahead and set up getting him down to nothing. That is the whole point here. Taking advantage of the fact that we've tapped out, we're going to pay 600 life to try to draw a card, and then we're going to hold priority by burning the God's Art of Beatrice. She has the God's Art regardless. It just won't do anything unless you have 0 cards in your hand. So we burned the God's Art mainly because we want to have access to the Fallen text of Inferno. We're going to banish a stone using the Revenant to kill Dark Alice. That's going to trigger Astema, who's going to produce as red-black. Either that or triggering it to draw us 2 cards. And then we're going to hold priority to that and use our will to do Inferno. So then what will happen is we will use Inferno, set everything to be equal, draw 2 cards off of the Astema, and then draw. Yeah, that's exactly what happens. What's happening. So we're triggering Astema mode to just draw 2 cards, holding priority, discard or cast Inferno with 0 cards in hand and quick cast for all modes. This will force his life down to be 21, same as us. It'll force his hand to be 0, and at the end of the resolution, we will draw 2 off of Astema and then draw 1 from Sealed One-Eyed, so we will be back up to 3 cards. Going into our turn, we will have 4 cards, and you see there we have another Divine Lightning. So at this point in time, pretty sure that's just game for this round because we have the will to be able to, as long as we hit a green source, that is, we have the will to be able to turn off Astema thanks to Divine Lightning. We just have to swing in for the damage first and hope we hit a green source off of the top with this Beatrice. Because at this point in time, Revenant is significantly huge. We have plenty of cards in hand. He's going to go ahead and... Oh, we did this during his main phase, or during his after draw before recovery. So he's truly no resources available to him. We do not see that Elixir's Love earlier. He decided to ship that to the bottom. Ironically, that could have been very helpful here because he could have used Paramita to mill it and then cast it and then try to reanimate or try to buy back a spell. Like rebuilding or buy back end of the Night of the Legendary Vampire and kind of keep going. But ultimately, he is just going to have to deal with the fact that he's staring things down here. So if we find a green source, which there it is, we are set up for Divine Lightning. We also see, though, we have a Gradius in here. So counting the number of unique cards for Revenant, swing in for a lot of damage. Swing in with Astema to realizing he needs to put the stone at the bottom of the deck from the Phantasmal earlier. Yeah, swinging in with Astema to take him down to negative. Oh no, choosing to hit the Phantasmal Ascendant. It's interesting. I think maybe just missing the lethal line. Could always reanimate the sealed one-eyed dragon to hit him. I don't know why we didn't just go in for lethal there. Just wasn't thinking about it. Anyway, I was forgetting that I had set his life down to be the same as mine with the Inferno. That could be just bad tracking on my part. Oh, wait, no, that's correct. Sorry, it was only one mode. So his life total would have been higher. Just realizing that now. So the Inferno only had the mode to make him discard his hand, so I wasn't lethal swinging. That's why we went for the Phantasmal Ascendant just to keep his board clear. So life totals on screen have been accurate. Me as the commentator being an absolute dunce and not realizing that issue. So apologies for that. But yes, Inferno only has all three modes if you control the ruler side of Astema, not if you control the J ruler side of Astema. So that's important to note. So just doing the mode to make him discard all of his hand, swinging and controlling the board state and saying, look, feel pretty confident that we're going to be able to kill you in the next turn, so let's keep your board as clear as possible. Playing March of the Dead Awakened here, going to get to buy back 2 Resonators, which includes his own Revenant that we saw earlier. So he has his own Revenant and a Guardian Dragon. The one advantage that I have here is the fact that I have so many cards. And if he banishes stones, his Guardian Dragon becomes infinitely easier to kill, which gives me the option to draw even more cards. So his Revenant is gigantic, absolutely, but it is not going to be able to kill anything relatively easily because of how many cards we have in hand on our side. It can get into a stone sacrifice kind of line here. Just kind of double checking exactly how big this is. The other nice thing, though, is that Astema is going to be able to kill that Revenant pretty easily because of her first strike and Bane. So it doesn't really matter how big it is. We are going to be able to kill it as long as Astema can get to swing in. Totaling access of 5 unique stones. So he is a 13/13 and can sacrifice to apply a -6 5 times. And we have at least 5 cards in hand at this point, or at least 3 cards in hand at this point, which should keep us pretty safe from having to deal with the Revenant. So choosing to pay, what are we paying into here? Oh, we're going to pay in and reanimate the sealed one-eyed dragon. Try to swing it into something, and we say, oh, okay, sure. Try to swing into Astema. Goes to combat. Swinging into Astema would probably be best here, obviously, to get her off the board with the Bane. We have our own sealed one-eyed dragon engraved that we could reanimate thanks to having access to Moonshade. 7 uniques, so our Revenant is only a 14/14 right now. Swinging in a Phantasmal Ascendant, knowing that we're going to have this stone that comes into play temporarily, but we're kind of okay with that because it's going to set up our next draw, and we're probably just going to sacrifice it to Revenant to try to kill something and make something smaller. So we're just going to go ahead and block the Sealed One-Eyed. Mainly, the point of blocking with something so small is that Sealed One-Eyed won't die. Oh, choosing not to sacrifice the stone to Revenant after all. Ultimately just passing the turn and getting to draw some extra cards thanks to the Astema trigger from Sealed One-Eyed going to grave. And then we get to draw into turn. Starting off with a Duet of Darkness. I really like this card for this deck, particularly because we're going to apply a nice little -6 to the board, not a huge deal. Lets us buy back a Sealed One-Eyed Dragon and force our opponent to discard a card. We're going to see a Lightchild Godsart in response, and we go, that is absolutely fine. We got Sealed One-Eyed Dragon, we got Persephone, you have no cards in hand, like it's all good. That's one of the other reasons why we play Duet of Darkness in this deck is because it's it's a card to follow up on the combo with. Our opponent's like, oh, I'm holding a card. Cool, well, Duet of Darkness, please discard it. Like, you just want to keep your opponent at 0 for the rest of the game. Going into combat, Astema is going to swing into the Revenant here with our first strike. We go to block. Double checking the stat lines here. Currently, we have 6 stones, I believe, so it's being a 15/15. Maybe it's maybe a little bit smaller. Oh, clearly not big enough with the number of stones to survive a -12. Oh, plus the -6, so it's getting a -18. So we sacrifice those 2 stones. We're going to trigger Astema. I think we use that to produce red-black. Astema is going to swing in and successfully kill the Revenant here. Doesn't get to gain any life because of the first strike. Double checking the number of unique cards here is certainly enough for Revenant to swing in to go ahead and get that lethal. Taking him down into the negative range. And then at that point in time, you see if we have Devil Gradius and Divine Lightning, we can just use the will produced from Astema to just turn off Astema, and the game is over. But we can't cast a spell this turn because of the White Child, so we gotta wait until his turn. So we discard the hand size. Go to his turn, but before I draw his turn, pay 200, use Astema, Gradius to turn off Astema, and end the game that way. So, taking it and going into game 3. So, didn't get to use the end of the Night of the Undefeated Legend, or the end of the Undefeated Legend to be able to do the combo, but the beauty of Phantasma, or of Wall of Terror is that it helps us get there as well. And then at that point in time, just controlling the board state with what we had, keeping our opponent's options limited, and just kind of grinding them out. Going into game 3, Josh choosing to take the coin. And then we go into the beginning of the game, hitting that Fireburn Fragment. Choosing to say, I do not want that card. Well, maybe I do want that card. Nope, I do not want that card after all. We will ship it and pass the turn to him. So it calls Stone. Darkness Moon Fragment, so access to black-green, get to do a little 4C. Looks like a Lucifer off the top. I kind of like seeing that. We saw that before. End of his turn, we're going to see a Phantasmal Ascendant come down here to try to get a temporary stone. Are we going to see him try to use that Keyless Spell in hand to stop the Phantasmal? This feels kind of suboptimal to do it here, especially since he knows what the deck does. Like, we're in game 3. Feels like it's not super necessary. He is going to go ahead and let that happen. We are going to then go ahead and use the extra stone, pay 2 to use the Kilo spell to pop the Pyramida. There is a world where we filter into white with Dark Gallus just to like keep our hand size full, keep our board protection up, but ultimately Josh says, no, I'm just going to let that die. Trigger Astema, we're going to replace the Kilo spell, which is nice, and then draw into turn. Look, we only have 4 cards to start the game. We need any kind of draw power we can, and Astema really helps to have that happen. Hitting another Moonshade. We're going to use the temporary Moonshade to go ahead and slam down a Wall of Terror. And the nice part is, because we have those 2 stones available, we are now constantly threatening Inferno. If we have Wall of Terror out. So since this resolves, if Josh isn't careful, he will be at 0 cards immediately. So he's really got to be careful about that. In response to losing the stone, we're going to see a Dark Alice come down. How is this Dark Atlas? I mean, it's serving as a nice replacement for the Pyramida to be able to protect his graveyard. The question is he going to immediately sack it off? I don't really recommend banishing it right now, especially because the Astema is there. So if he chooses to banish it, like, sure, he'll draw some cards here, but at the same time, so will I. But ultimately, me having more cards also doesn't super help him because, I mean, I suppose the worst case scenario is the fact that, like, I start discarding cards and he, like now, the biggest problem is that I'd already cast a spell that turn, right? So in that sequence, if I start to discard cards, he uses Light Child, and I have to either like discard all of my cards there, or he just waits until I try to go use the God's Art, and in response to the God's Art, you Light Child. Like, he has ways in that end step to be able to prevent himself from losing his whole hand. So gotta wait a little bit longer and see exactly what we can try to push through. Kind of goal of the Astema deck at this point in time is to threaten the combo in such a way that I'm not really going to try to execute it, to try to tap Josh out, and then I'm safe to be able to pull off the combo when I actually want. It's a lot of game of like fishing, right? I'm fishing for him to try to throw out answers when I'm really actually waiting for him to run out of gas, and then I can push through, and at that point in time, he's probably just out of resources. Josh really thinking about what he wants to do here, knowing that if he taps out, he's in danger of getting infernoed, especially since I haven't cast a card yet this turn, so White Child can't protect him, and if he doesn't have any cancels in hand, he's just going to have to take it. You see there's a Knight of the Legendary Vampire, 2 of them in his hand right now, but he only has access to 2 stones, and with only 2 cards in graveyard and 2 stones, he wouldn't be able to contract. Or 3 cards in hand and 2 stones, he wouldn't be able to contract. He could go for that Lord of Tsukiyomi. That would certainly help. Ultimately, though, he is going to try to seemingly go for a Repairing the Deathscythe. A little bit risky since he knows there's Persephone, but it is certainly an option that he could take. End of his turn, we're going to go ahead and try to ramp into some more stones with a Phantasmal Ascendant. Are we going to see him burn some cards in response? He says, nope, that's fine. You're going to have that temporary stone will 4C, and we'll go into our turn. Not burning our whole deck in the process. Draw for turn, move to recovery. Swing in for some early damage. Not that it matters because we plan on taking his life down to 2,000. You know, if we get past the 2,000 life point mark, then going for End of the Undefeated probably just isn't something we do in general. But ultimately, until we reach 2,000 life points or less, End of the Undefeated Legend is always an option for this deck. Filter into a red, play his own Phantasmal Ascendant, gets an extra stone. Choosing whether or not he wants to keep that card on top. He might think twice this time about going for losing an Elixir's Love, just to be able to potentially set up buying a card back if he does get looped out again. Still at the end step, we're going to go ahead and see another Lucifer. This is fine. It's going to do a nice little life point swing. But we say, like, wait a minute, we're actually going to fight over this Lucifer a little bit. So in response to his enter effect, let's go ahead and do Gradius to try to remove all of the abilities and shoot him. Keeping in mind that because he's lost all his abilities and he's destroyed, we won't have to discard a card. So this is kind of an ideal situation for us. And we know we will find more Gradiuses and Divine Lightnings later to turn off Astema when we're ready. So the Lucifer dies, I draw a card, and then we say, yep, the life point swing happens, go down to 31, you're back up to 33. Draw for his turn. Sees that Dark Alice there. We've lost the temporary stone. And this is where I think there's a little bit of an error in the gameplay. We go for a Dark Alice. He has access to coin. And if you look at this hand, there's not much in there in terms of interaction. The only instant speed card that I can see is the Guinevere, or is the Killua spell. And none of that actually can stop any amount of the line of the combo. And so what we can do here is, you know, we could do it now to force the draw discards to be whatever we want, but also at the same time, because he has 2 Resonators on the field, even if we do all 3 modes, he'd be able to keep the Phantasmal Ascendant and the Dark Alice, so he could just draw, sack, and that doesn't help us at all. We specifically want to hit him at a moment where he's already done these draws for Dark Alice, and so probably after the Dark Alice resolves, but before he recovers, we're going to go in and try to do the Inferno. At that point in time, it's safe. From the only thing that could stop us is a Lorite, or a Persephone, or a Cancel, which we certainly have options for that, and does make things a little bit risky, especially since there's a Light Child here. Ultimately, the best response to Josh would be if I do go for a God's Art of Inferno, that we respond to that with Light Child, so that again, I don't have any way to be able to protect it. If he doesn't do that though, then it means that he doesn't have any form of interaction for the loop, and he's the Inferno, and he's just gonna have to take it. Double checking what's in grave. Saying that is fine. The Dark Alice is allowed to resolve. Then what we're going to say is actually, in response to the enter effect, just to kind of play things safe, we're going to pay 1 red. If we're not going to go for the full combo here, we want to at least minimize his choices, and we're going to see the Killua Fossil Girl in the city to cancel the automatic ability of the Dark Alice. Now, the reason why we're doing this is also to kind of bait him a little bit. If he tries to go Light Child here in response, then we're going to go God's Art, and we're just going to go ahead and go for it. If he does, just let it happen. You know, if he burns a will for it, then we're probably going to go for the God's Art. There's a lot of different things that we can do to kind of try to bait out that situation. Ultimately, no, not necessary, because he just accepted it, called stone, and recovered. And so now we are in the main phase. Lots of resources available for Josh. He'll have 2, 3, 4 stones once he calls for stone plus coins. So he's at 5. Easily you can get to being able to do one of those contracts, if not back-to-back contracts. So it certainly just seems like it might be a matter of time before End of Night starts to come down into the board and start doing some real work. Especially since we know there's Phantasmal Ascendants and there's Lucifers, we can start kind of draining things out. He just has the one Phantasmal and the one Lucifer, but he also knows that I have Phantasmals too. And keep in mind that Asuka can reanimate things from both sides of the board. So he could use Night of the Legendary Vampire to pop my Ascendants as well as his, and then reanimate 3 of them, and then get a bunch more stones, and then use the other End of Night. Like, there's a lot of stuff he can do here. But as you see, his hand is purely interaction related. Purely has just the Killua spell in it, and so there's no other interaction beyond that. Josh, look at his hand, feeling exactly how he wants to do this line. Probably the most optimal play line, if he is going to go in for it at this time, because I've already burned the Killua spell, would be for him to use Child of the Light Moon just now, saying like, you burned your one spell for the turn, I'm going to try to start going in, you know, maybe gassed out a little bit too early. Does decide to just go ahead and move ahead with the Night of the Legendary Vampire. Thinking about exactly how we want to work this to resolve, what he's going to target. It's going to pop his own Dark Alice and the Phantasmal Ascendants, it looks like. Discarding to be able to protect the Wall of Terror, and discarding to be able to protect myself. See, that's fine. That can resolve. So mills the 4, pops the Dark Alice, and then gets to go to End of Night. Keep in mind that he just destroyed one of his own things, so Astema's going to trigger and get us some extra will, which is always great. It's a Lucifer, a Sealed One-Eyed Dragon, a Laura Tsukiyomi, and another Phantasmal Ascendant. So now there are 3 Phantasmal Ascendants available for him to be able to reanimate. It's just a matter of what he wants to grab from either side. 2 Lucifers in Graveyard 2 is also really nice for being able to kind of do a big life point swing. His own Phantasmal, 2 Lucifers, and then one of the Phantasmals from my side of the graveyard situation. So we're going to get to ramp a lot of stones here. But as you saw, again, not a lot of stuff to move in his on his field at this point. Now that we are in this moment, though, the Light Child doesn't super help him that much, because he's at a point now where if he does Light Child, we're just going to do our playline in response, which is not helpful for him. And again, he just has access to the Killua spell in terms of interaction. So kind of missed the window a little bit, unfortunately. But he still has priority. Like, he gains priority. We told him we're not going to do anything in response to these enters. We're just going to let all of them resolve. We're going to take the life loss. You can ramp the stones. Not a big deal. You do all your 4Cs. Everything is good. Swings in for 4 with the Phantasmal. We block with the Wall of Terror. They just kind of bounce off each other. So he does have a second Night of the Legendary Vampire in his hand. And he says, you know what? We're going to go for it. And at this point in time, you're going to see a little transition here. We had to step away from just a second to take care of something, but we are back. That last card we have in our hand intentionally was Persephone. So we try to Goddard Astema in response to the Knight of the Legendary Vampire. He could respond here with Light Moonchild. That would be like the proper response. There is a world where we bait here by trying to do the Beatrice Godsart in response, but we've already shown him what the card in our hand is. So a little bit of a just kind of a play error here, not really thinking about Light Moonchild. We're going to use the Floating Will from him killing the Dark Alice, and then paying 200 to cast Inferno, and then holding priority before that Inferno resolves. We're going to pay another 200 and cast, use Persephone's activate ability to put the Knight of the Legendary Vampire back in his hand. So because Knight isn't quick cast, and we can do all 3 modes, we do get to put the Knight of the Legendary Vampire back in his hand and then force him to discard everything. Which is great for us because it truly will set him back to 0 with no contract. He'll get to keep an End of Night and probably a Lucifer. The other Lucifer will make us discard a card, but we don't have any cards in our hand. And at the end of the turn, we're going to get to draw off a Beatrice and then draw into our turn and do all kinds of good stuff from there. We're also going to take his life total from 43 down to 17 to match us. All of it resolves. We set him down to 17. We say pick 1 Resonator to keep along with your End of Night because it doesn't impact J rulers. Keeping a Lucifer makes the most sense because it can force me to discard as well as, you know, it's a flying blocker. And at the end of the turn, we will be able to draw some cards here. We'll draw 4 Beatrice, and then we'll also draw for our turn. So we'll be at 2 cards to his 0. And at that point in time, we'll also be able to flip over Astema on our turn and really kind of start to get some value generating here. And kind of stay ahead of the curve from any other follow-up plays that Josh might have. So a little bit of a misplay from Josh in terms of using Light Child defensively. There's like this weird moment of like, if he uses it now, it's too late. If he uses it now, it's too early. If he uses it now, it's too late again. Just kind of in terms of sequencing for you guys to learn of how to properly use that to support your combos and kind of disrupt your opponent's play lines. Double checking all of the temporary stones, which are going to get to go away. We are going to see a reanimate of a sealed one-eyed dragon and swing in, and we say, yeah, that's fine. We'll take the 7 from that. Goes down to 10. Might as well make use of them before we go to the end of turn. I'm at 0 cards, so Beatrice will go off, and I get to draw a card from Null, and then we get to draw a card for turn. See, there's a voice from the void there. That's very nice for us to see. Since we are in the Null area as well, we can draw into a lot more cards that way too if we really need to. There's also a Dexius advice, which feels really nice. Calling Stone. Paying 2 to Judgment Astema. The argument here is, do we do Astema to try to produce extra will to go into the Dexius advice and tap out? Or do we use Astema just to draw more cards and kill his stuff? Especially since we are going to have to discard a card from the Lucifer getting destroyed as well. Gonna kill those 2. In response, looks like maybe he was going to use Child of the Darkest Moon, but ultimately no, just decided to let it die. So both of them to die. Have to discard a card to Lucifer. The Dexius advice is probably what gets cut here. But it might still be a card worth saving in the hand. Oh, no, they're choosing to discard the Voice from the Void and then drawing an additional 2 cards thanks to Astema's trigger. So we have Dexia's Advice, Divine Predator, Divine Lightning to be able to turn off Astema, which is great, as well as another Sealed One-Eyed Dragon, which is probably not getting used at this point. Passing the turn to Josh. I'm going to go ahead and try to use Darkness Moonchild here to try to pop the Astema, which point in time we're going to go ahead and use Wall of Terror to give it barrier by discarding probably at this point in time the Dexia's Advice gets cut, because we're shooting to try to kill him next turn. Draw for turn. Does see a Laura Tsukiyomi, which is really helpful considering he has Birth of the Twin, or the Knight of the Legendary Vampire in the graveyard. At this point in time, we're going to see Lightchild God's Art to say, you get 1 card this turn. We are not going to fight any more than over just 1 card. I get 1 card in hand, you get 1 card in hand. Answer it. Something like a Persephone wouldn't help here because I just put it back in his hand and he recasts it. He has the will to be able to do that. Something like Memory of Worlds doesn't help. Like, it has to be either a hard cancel or some kind of way to stop him. A Persephone could remove the card that he targets from graveyard from hand if he uses this Laura Tsukiyomi. So when he goes to target End of Night, we just remove it and then he just like mills 2 and does nothing. We don't have that in hand though, so we are just going to have to let him resolve it. He's going to buy back Knight of the Legendary Vampire and try to go in for some kind of contract and push me out. With only 1,000 life, if this resolves, he certainly does win the game, right? Because he definitely has 2 Lucifers in graveyard, and that's enough to kill me. Hits another couple Legendary Vampire and a Revenant. Josh thinking how he wants to go in here. He might as well go for it. I mean, if he doesn't, he's dead next turn anyway because, well, I guess he's not fully dead because it's only 16 damage represented. Going to go ahead and go for a Knight of the Legendary Vampire. He's using his filter. We'll respond by paying down to 600 life with our 2 Moonshades to cast a Divine Lightning to try to make it so that Asuka is not able to contract this turn. And then discard our Sealed One-Eyed Dragon to give Astema barrier, and then because I have no cards in hand, Wall of Terror naturally has barrier, so essentially just making this card mill 4 cards from the top of your deck. He will be able to reanimate a Sealed One-Eyed Dragon if he wants, but we have Wall of Terror at that point in time to be able to protect the Astema, and if he does swing in with it, they would trade off of each other because the Wall of Terror also has Bane, and so I'll be able to draw some more cards or be able to produce some more will. There's lots of things that, like, having more cards because of him taking a shot with his Phantasmal or his Sealed One-Eyed Dragon would honestly be great for me. Means we could draw into a Dexia's Advice and set up a Revenant. There's like lots of different lines that we could take here based on what's still left in the deck. And it also gives us more chances to be able to draw into something like another Divine Lightning or a Gradius. The deck is playing 4 copies of both. Because he used the filter earlier, he is going to have to pay 2. We're going to reanimate that Sealed One-Eyed Dragon. Coming back in. Doesn't have enough will to be able to reanimate it twice though. Swings into the Astema. We say no. We're going to block with the Trooper. And then in response to the trigger from Astema, we're going to go ahead and God Art Astema or Beatrice at this point to draw another 2 cards. And then we'll draw 2 cards from Astema, which is great. So drawing into our turn, we will be going to 5 cards. We do have the Voice from the Void in the graveyard too that we could have used at any one point to draw an additional card if needed. Yeah, because we had 0 cards in hand. So there's a world where we use, to prevent him from, if he had the will to prevent him from being able to reanimate, we just like draw a card with Voice from the Void so that we don't have the Bane, and then we just block the dragon, and then that's the end of it. Going into main phase, we have 5 cards going into his turn, which is great. We can call Stone. We still need to kill him this turn, though. It's like the time of like, hey, you're tapped out. Don't have a way to shoot this. I want to try to kill you this turn if we can. We're going to go ahead and use Inferno with just the mode to set your life down to 600. Say, look, that's going to do 1100 of the work for us, which is great. Swing in with Astema to take him down into the negatives, and then because we drew so many cards, we have access to Gradius, and once again we have turned off Astema, and that is the game. So there you guys have it. Nice close match. A couple of little misplays on both sides that kind of had some influence of whether one would be successful, but you can see kind of what Astema Beatrice does and also what Asuka kind of does look like in this kind of new era. Hope you guys liked it. Deck profiles would be, both lists would be up later this week, and until next time, this is DMO73 saying class dismissed.